If you are an ADHDer over the age of 50, then today's video is for you because I am going to go through some of the biggest and most popular pain points that folks in their 50s, 60s, and 70s are dealing with as newly diagnosed ADHDers. And while this video is addressing their concerns, I think this is a video that all ADHDers need to watch because if you are lucky and privileged enough to live long enough to get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s, then you too will be dealing with these issues. And let me say right off the bat, as you get older, it doesn't make dealing with ADHD any easier because the reality is that not only are you dealing with your highly distractible brain, but you're also dealing with the realities of physical and cognitive decline. And you're probably also dealing with a lot of changes in your life. Like maybe you're an empty nester now, or maybe you're retired and you've lost your structure and your sense of purpose. And everything needs to be reimagined from the ground up. So that's what I'm going to get into in today's video. But first, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Karen McGill. I'm an ADHD coach and creator. I'm also a late diagnosed ADHDer myself. I didn't get diagnosed until I hit my 50s, and I can so relate to many of the pain points I have received from folks in their 50s, 60s, and 70s dealing with ADHD and looking for solutions at this new stage of life. And let me just pause here for a second, because I know what some of you are thinking right now. If you are 50, 60, 75, and you think you have ADHD, but you wonder, is it worth it to get a diagnosis? First of all, I will tell you from my own experience, it is absolutely worth getting a diagnosis. But I will also say that of all the folks that have reached out to me that are my age or older, the majority of them have stated that they've gotten a diagnosis and it has made a difference. On that note, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, ZocDoc. If you have never heard of ZocDoc, it is a free website and app that will help you find and book appointments with over 100,000 in-network healthcare providers across every specialty, including ADHD. Honestly, I wish I knew what the service when I was getting a diagnosis. I ended up doing tons of research with a spreadsheet and contacting all of these providers separately. But fortunately, you don't have to do that. You just search for a provider in your area and just filter for what matters, like finding a doctor that takes your insurance and that has great patient reviews, and then you just book instantly. There is no phone tag, no guessing games, and you can see real-time availability too. So you can often book an appointment within 24 to 72 hours. So if you've been waiting for the right time to get the care you need, let this new year be that right time. Just head to ZocDoc.com/Karen McGill and find your provider today. So back to what I was saying, I do hear from a lot of folks that just got a diagnosis after 50, 60, and 70. When they sign up for my email list, I always ask them, what are you struggling with right now that I could potentially make an episode about to help you? And here's just a few comments I've heard that I think you're absolutely going to resonate with. How can I go from the reason I'm not getting anything done is because I have ADHD to, okay, I have ADHD, so let's get on with it. How do I update my goals for my 70s when my goals have been around for 20 to 30 years? I can completely understand the frustration with that perspective, but I think the next comment I read is going to shed a lot of light on it. This person writes, I'm 64 and I haven't been able to determine what I want or need out of life versus what others want or need me to be. I want the last third of my life to be fulfilling, gratifying, and exciting, but I don't know where to get started. I'm frozen and I'm so afraid of the rest of my life just being a continuation of what's gone on before. I completely relate to what that person said, and I think a lot of what I address in this video is going to help. But before we go on, I want to call out what they said. I'm having a hard time deciding what I need to be versus what other people need me to be. When you grow up with a neurodivergent brain, one of the first survival skills that you learn is to mask, because your natural inclinations are not what other people want you to express or do. They want you to be neurotypical. And you learn that if you're going to survive in your family of origin, in your friend groups, and later on as a student and then as an employee, you have to do things a certain way that often go against your natural tendencies. That's pretty much what masking is. So the second commenter is saying, how do I go into this next chapter of life without masking when that's all I've ever known how to do? And I think that relates beautifully to updating your goals as a 70-year-old, because those goals that you had 30 years ago probably related to a different person. And that person was probably masking a lot of the time. So the first question I would ask myself as a 70-year-old is, do those goals that I've kind of had in the back of my mind for 25 to 30 years, do they make sense now? Are they really something that I'm intrinsically motivated and interested in doing, knowing what I know about myself now? And if I were to give myself permission to be my full, authentic self here in my 70s, would those goals still matter? Or do I need to clean the slate and think about who I am now as a 70-year-old, what's important to me, what matters to me, and what do I want from my authentic self going forward? Those are just a few thoughts I have around those initial comments. But what I want to do now is address the feelings that I think a lot of us are dealing with in our 50s, 60s, and 70s with this new diagnosis, and help to reframe a diagnosis as maybe not the end of the world, but the start of something new. And that is in no way to undermine or diminish the big feelings you probably have about being diagnosed so late. I've mentioned before that it can often feel like somebody's handing you the guidebook to life 30 years too late. There's a lot to unpack there. And there can be a lot of anger and resentment towards parents that didn't know or teachers that didn't see it, and how you were punished for something that was not your fault. And I think it's really important to go through and feel those feelings and process that emotion. And that can take different amounts of time for different people. The one caveat I would say is that as you go through that phase of regret, which is usually followed by an initial sense of relief, like, oh, okay, now I know what's the issue. And then you dive into that feeling of, oh my God, like what could life have been had I known earlier? And that is really the dip of this whole process, but it's also a very important part of the process. So when you're at that point of having processed the sadness and the regret and the shame and the anger, quite frankly, of all the things in the past that you cannot change, once you're ready to move past that, that is where I want to meet you with this video so that you can make your future endeavors so much better. And the very first step of coming out of that deep period of processing emotion is to reframe everything you just went through the lens of self-compassion. If you can imagine the child that you were, knowing what you know now, would you berate that child? Or would you say, you know what? You did the best you could with what you had. They didn't know, you didn't have the support you needed. Things totally could have been different. And look at all of the amazing things that you did, regardless of the struggles that you had. And when you think to all of the accomplishments that you have made, despite having these unknown struggles, you can absolutely see where you have inherent strengths that pulled you through, whether it's gratitude or curiosity or persistence. Those strengths are the things that you can continue to lean on because they don't go away. Those are your natural and inherent support mechanisms. So think about all the accomplishments that you have made and think about the strengths that you leaned on to get through them. And remember that they are still there for you as you map out this next chapter of your life. The next thing I think it's so important to do is recraft your personal narrative. If you are someone who believes that you don't finish what you start and you can never do anything and you are messy or unorganized, any sort of limiting belief that you have is also a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as that second commenter said, they don't want their future to be a repeat of their past. If you want to change your future, you have to come into it with a different understanding of yourself. So given that you now have this lens of self-compassion when you think of your former self, give that person the gift of forgiveness for not being able to do the things they wanted to do in the past. Now that you have this diagnosis, you have a roadmap to a different future, which can include therapy, medication, coaching, any kind of support that you can get access to is going to change your future. But all of it will be for naught if you are not willing to change the fundamental beliefs that you have of yourself. So that belief that you start things and never finish them has to be reframed as, before I was diagnosed with ADHD, this is what I believed about myself. Now, going forward, I have a new belief. And maybe that belief is I'm learning to be more discerning about the things I commit to so that I will follow through on them. It doesn't matter what the belief is. It matters that you're paying attention to what they are, and you're making a concerted effort to change it. Because the more you can actually shift your beliefs, the more you're going to change your identity. The more you change your identity, the better choices that you're going to make based on this new identity. And that is the key thing that's going to make your future different from the past. If you don't want your future to look like your past, you have to examine the beliefs you have about yourself and start changing that narrative towards the person you want to become. And to that end, no matter how old you are, I don't care if you're 97, always have a vision of who you are working towards being in the future. When I think about my future self, she is a badass 75-year-old lifting weights, doing yoga, and just basically doing whatever it is she wants. She pays no attention to social norms. She couldn't care less what other people's expectations or opinions are. She's just completely and 100% who she is. And I am so excited to become that person. So who is your future self, and who are you excited to become, knowing what you now know about yourself? And once you have that future vision of yourself, that makes setting goals for your 70-year-old self a lot easier, because you're clear on the direction you want to go in and what's most important to you. So with that said, if you want to set goals, now is the time to do that. But here's the thing, if you've had goals for 20 or 30 years that never came to fruition, it could be that your expectations are not in alignment with reality. So as you move into this phase of life where time and energy become more and more precious, make sure the goals that you're setting are realistic and doable so that you're not setting yourself up for disappointment in the future. This is really the stage of life where you want to not only enjoy the process of your goals, but actually seeing them through to fruition and feeling good about yourself in the process. And the last point I'll make to any ADHDer over the age of 50 who wants a future that looks different from their past is to not only focus on your inherent strengths, which I've already covered, but also on your needs, your values, and the things that truly interest you. Because the more you lean on those things, the less your ADHD symptoms will get in your way. And the beautiful thing about being at this stage of life is that we have so few F's to give about other people's opinions or what other people want for us rather than what we want for ourselves, that we really do have the freedom to examine who we are now, what we really want, and what we want the rest of our lives to look like. We are in the best stage of life to create an authentic future. So I hope you consider this as your permission for a new beginning rather than focusing on the past that you have no power to change. So on that note, guys, I hope that I've inspired you to think a little bit differently about your ADHD now and in the future. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.